Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss the conclusions that I've drawn from my study of American history. My method is I read trusted historians, that people that don't seem to have an agenda, but that are doing scholarly work. I explore what I can of the primary sources that they list, like journals, notes, letters, law documents, newspaper accounts. I can't always get a hold of that stuff. Sometimes I know it's something that they've had to purchase or whatever. I just like some university might have all of Tom Jefferson Davis's letters, and they charge you $99 to for access. I can't do that, but I can. Many times these sources are available. So these are my conclusions. Now you don't have to believe what I believe. I'm not trying to propagate an ideology. I'm trying to tell you what my conclusions are, but I want you to know about these things and study them for yourself, and and know the names, know the events, and get an idea of what you think about the topics. And slavery is an important topic in American history. A lot of our events hinged around it, were caused by it, um, and a great many things were built by it, and a great many fortunes were made by it. So, I mean, even to the recent collapse, financial collapse, the Lehman Brothers financial house, they were founded by slave traders. I mean, so there's it's very important today. It has connections today. It's not just a thing in the past that you go, oh, that happened a long time ago. It's still intertwined. So excuse me. So let's begin. Now, as I said, um, slavery is complicated. Like, for instance, when you look at some laws in some places where the heritage of a slave had to come through his mother, and you would say, well, that gave the master the ability to have sex with his slaves, and he found comely, attractive, and not have a legal claim on his wealth. It'd be totally up to him if they and you go, well, that's really cruel. Well, that's also what they did to the Irish. So that's where the English got that from the Irish, or where you couldn't be charged with raping your slave. They're your property. Well, go back to the way they treated the Irish. At times when you could not be an Englishman could not be charged with raping an Irish woman, um, or when you could in certain places you could you could kill your slave, although that was not the case in most of the time. But and not be charged with murder, your property. Go back to the treatment of the Irish on not being able to be charged with murder for killing an Irishman. So, as I said before, many of these things in many locales came directly from the way the English treated the Irish. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not new, um, but it is specifically narrowed as a to create a subclass of serfs, of slaves who are black, who are they're at the very bottom, so that there's a buffer of white laborers and poor whites who will regard themselves as linked to the ruling class because they're white, instead of, as before Bacon's Rebellion, during Bacon's Rebellion and before, as the association of slaves and servants as a group, white and black. We're the ones that are being having the boot of the big shots on our neck. So they just changed that. They separated one group from another. This was done in Ireland as well. So this is very, very interesting stuff. Slavery is like racism. It's complicated. You can't just say one thing in like a movie where you make this ridiculous flat out statement that covers everything. Like when I was a child in the Somerset County, Maryland, I saw as a little kid black students from the local college walking into square in the center of town, singing "We Shall Overcome" or whatever, and being having the fire hose turned on by the volunteer fire company. I saw that with my own eyes, even if somebody denies it. Um, it was weird because if a an older elderly black person with the Alzheimer's dementia wandered out, black white people would go help find them. If we went to a gravel pit one time and there was a black teen had drowned, and his father and brother were trying to find his body, and all the white people were standing on the outside ring, watching the black people. And I said to my father, "Why aren't we helping?" He said, "We won't help unless they ask. If they want us to help, we'll help. Let them go. Let them do what they have to do." And then they found the body, and it was just very strange to me. You know, the black women who babysat me, and my brother, and cleaned our house, they could come in because they were doing that. But yet, our neighbor, who old Lazarus, when we gave him catfish, he sat at the picnic table outside. He wasn't invited in. Racism is a very subtle thing. It can be very blatant, but it can also be very subtle, and it permeates our entire society, regardless of whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Okay, it's there. We need to deal with it. It's like this giant thing in the living room. You know, you're sitting there having tea, talking to your friends, and trying to pretend it's not a big deal, and there it is. It's there. So um, let's um, let's go on. And slavery did not become firmly seated in Virginia, actual slavery, not servitude, but slavery, until after 1681, when, according to the royal governor's estimation, there were 3,000 blacks and 15,000 white servants out of a total population of 70 to 80,000 people. Included with the count of black people were a number of free blacks, some of whom who had become wealthy. In Northampton County, there was a community of free blacks who had acquired hundreds of acres by the system of head rights. The imported slaves from Africa and servants from England, to such an extent that the assembly, they imported slaves from Africa, the free blacks and servants from England, to such an extent that the assembly in 1670 declared it illegal for blacks to own white servants, because there were black people who actually who had white servants from England. These blacks had been emancipated by their masters, partly as a reward for faithful service, and partly because of the feeling that it was wrong to hold a man as a slave once he had converted to Christianity. And remember, I just want to bring out, like in White Cargo and Theodore Allen's Invention of the White Race, books like that you can read, like Anthony Johnson, one of the blacks, possibly from that first ship, who were freed, owned black slaves, like named Caesar, who ran away. Was Johnson was sued in court. Caesar was one of the first ones held, possibly. Again, this is not specific, not known for sure, but Caesar may be one of the first people held as a slave for life legally, and his owner was black. So, but that had to be changed. They could not have that. So the power brokers made it illegal for blacks to own white servants. Uh, and then of course it became difficult for them to own slaves. Although in South Carolina later on, black people did own slaves, or mulattoes owned slaves, so black slaves. So a very complicated subject. The French Huguenots of South Carolina and their rice plantations helped create the slave economy there, as the planters, owing to various diseases and the isolation of plantations, often chose to actually live in Charleston and leave the day-to-day operation of their properties to the hired hands. Rice culture required a great deal of slave labor to produce. South Carolina exported 42,000 barrels in 1731, and this amount tripled by 1765, making South Carolina the greatest importer of slaves in the colonies. In every colony south of the border state of Maryland, the population of blacks of African descent or freshly imported slaves outnumbered white servants by 1720. This trend continued. For instance, in 1715, there were 23,000 blacks in Virginia out of a population that totaled 95,000. In 1756, there were 120,156 blacks out of a total population of 293,474. In the coastal counties, blacks outnumbered whites by nearly 2 to 1. North Carolinians only owned 19,000 slaves out of a population of 98,000 people in 1756. But in South Carolina, partly due to the new need for indigo for English textiles, the assembly was forced to make a law that a white owner had to have one white servant for every 25 blacks, due to the disproportionate number of Africans. There were also duties placed on slave importing. South Carolina suffered the worst slave rebellions in the colonies as a result. There was the Cato Conspiracy of 1739, which saw 75 of both races killed, and one the next year, which resulted in 50 blacks being hung. And so, it wasn't always one-sided. I mean, I read some legal documents where there were black slaves who were actually found not guilty, who had killed an overseer, who were found not guilty because the overseer was trying to kill them. And so, there was laws protecting slaves, but it varies from place to place. So we're going to talk about the North next, and then go back to the South. And I hope you'll think about this and study this, come up with your own conclusions, and because it's really interesting stuff and important. Thank you.